Welcome back, everyone. Let's get straight into it. This is why I have a channel, to yell about stuff like this.
Senator, I think what you mean by robo-debt is compliance per se. Is that what you mean by robo-debt?
No, I think everybody pretty well understands what robo-debt is. The only term that we've used today that no one understands or is questioning is what legal insufficiency. You know, robo-debt's robo-debt. We know what that is. Can you answer the question?
It's actually not a term of art. It's not something that's used by the department. So maybe we could have a definition.
So I'm sorry, Chair, I don't know what robo-debt means.
That is an extraordinary admission at this point.
Because in the context of the question, can I just finish? No. I don't know what robo-debt means.
Well then. Alright, the woman in the white is Labor Senator Deb O'Neill. She was asking questions to Catherine Campbell, the former Secretary for the Department of Human Services, which is the department that was in charge of the robo-debt scheme. And this is a Senate inquiry hearing into the robo-debt scheme. Oh, and I thought I'd chuck this in there just so we can see how much she gets paid to not know what robo-debt means. Oh, it gets better. It gets better, everybody.
Gameplay.
She's trying.
People have died over robo-debt and you don't even
Senator,
acknowledge the
Chair,
word.
I do not accept those assertions that are being made. They are not correct.
Your staff have said it.
Difficult. It's alleged that the staff. These are staff. This was a letter from the union. We accept that. We've talked about that. But I do not think it's appropriate that... No, I do not accept people have died over robo-debt.
You do not?
I do not accept
Well, I'm
that.
sure the families of those who died and committed suicide will be very, very unhappy with your answer today.
We know that suicide is a very difficult subject. We know mental health issues are very difficult. We do not accept that. We have apologised for the hurt and harm, but none of us can imagine what goes on in individuals' lives. So I do not accept that.
Okay, before we address the elephant in the room that she doesn't accept, I want to quickly go over something that I feel most people might look over, but how she says that they apologised. What apology? Oh, was she talking about like the reports from mid-June where the Prime Minister supposedly apologised for the robo-debt and the harm it's done? Let's have a look. I did a whole video about that.
And of course, I would deeply regret any hardship that has been caused to people in the conduct of that activity. The government has many difficult jobs that it has to do, dealing with Australians in very sensitive circumstances, and that is true, particularly at this time. And it is our instruction that we would hope that all agents of the government, when pursuing the debt recovery option, that they would be sensitive to people's circumstances.
Okay, that's what they got out of him after Bill Shorten detailed a very touching story of the struggles an individual faces and how it got worse after they received a robo-debt. Now let's see what they got the day before when he was asked point blank by the current leader of the opposition, will you apologise for the robo-debt?
But let me say this, the matter upon which the government has made a policy decision is on the basis that income averaging, a practice that was implemented by the Labor Party and government, Mr Speaker, embraced by the Labor Party as part of their debt recovery mechanisms.
Members on my left.
The issue of income averaging, Mr Speaker, income averaging that could not be relied on solely in order to raise debts in relation to social security matters. Now that is the matter, Mr Speaker. That is the actual matter. It is a policy and it is a principle that was embraced by the Labor Party, that has been followed by this government, and, Mr Speaker, where the circumstances have now presented that income averaging is not something that could be relied upon solely, then the government has made it right.
Do you hear that? Make it right. But the thing is, you can't bring people back from the dead. So there are some families that you can never make it right for. You can pay them back the money and it will never be right for them. Like the family of Jared and Reese's family and the family of a 19-year-old mother who took her life after she received a $9,000 debt. You can't make that right. Back to Catherine Campbell, the former head of the Department of Human Services, who claims she doesn't know what it means, but also knows that it did not play a role in anybody taking their own life. But yeah, okay. Let's do a little thought experiment. We'll call it the Catherine Campbell thought experiment. Let's say there's someone who was getting New Start or any sort of government benefits. Let's say they're trying really hard to get a job, but it's not working out too quickly for them, and their mental health is deteriorating for various reasons, and then the government comes along and gives you a robo-debt. It's very reasonable to say that the debt wasn't the only cause, but you have to be mad to say that it fucking didn't make it worse. Because just from the perspective of someone who is battling with mental health issues, a debt from the government which you may not have even have racked up sure as fuck is not going to help your mental state. And I think it could be even a reasonable thing to point where everything could be going fine. Your life is sweet. And then this happens to you, and then this turns everything south. What you're looking at is recycled footage from one of the first videos I ever made. And I made little stamps out of potatoes of little gravestones and made my housemate help me. And I still didn't even get close to the actual number. Oh, and one quick side note about how both Morrison and Campbell brought up Labour and who came up with this in past governments and yada yada. To me, it really seems like, especially after you look at the numbers, it's like someone who just did a mass shooting saying to you, I didn't invent the gun. It's like, no, but you did all the damage with it. And finally, I'm going to wrap this up with an article from The Guardian by Luke, who definitely needs a shout out. He does great work, especially with this robo-debt stuff. Definitely a good source to go to. Pretty much without him, this whole video wouldn't have happened. So other than those couple of quick side notes, let's have a look at some more shit fuckery on the government's part in regards to the robo-debt. Government argues Centrelink robo-debt letter did not compel recipients to provide documents. Defense against the class action seeking refunds claim letter telling people they must confirm or update details was only a request. Hundreds of thousands of welfare recipients who handed in Centrelink pay slips or bank statements after getting a robo-debt letter were never forced to hand over the information, the federal government says. In an updated defense to the federal court class action, the Commonwealth says an initial letter sent to welfare recipients through the robo-debt program was only a request and did not compel people to hand over the documents. The government has conceded that 470,000 debts based on the Australian Tax Office data were unlawful, but wants to deny refunds to a smaller group of people who provided payslips or bank statements after getting an initial letter or debt notice and were then found to owe money. The argument, if accepted by the court, would allow the government to resist wiping or paying back about 200,000 debts which are worth about $500 million, according to confidential figures seen by The Guardian Australia. The respondent said that by sending an initial letter, it requested but did not compel group members to provide income information to the Commonwealth, the government says in a court document obtained by Guardian Australia. The defence adds that no statutory power was or is required to request the provision of information to the Commonwealth on a voluntary basis. More than 1 million of these initial letters were sent to welfare recipients through the robo-debt program, which ran in its unlawful form from mid-2015 until November 2019. They generally started at Centrelink and had detected a discrepancy between the fortnightly income of a person declared to the agency while receiving welfare benefits and annual pay information held by the ATO. A version of the letter sent in 2017 after the scheme had already erupted and scandal started. You must confirm or update the information within 28 days of receiving this letter. Please note, if you do not confirm or update the information within 28 days, we may apply the employment dates and income from the ATO to your record. This may result in a debt you will need to repay. In November, the government conceded that the use of the ATO data to issue debts to the welfare recipients was unlawful. Gordon Legal argues that there are about 600,000 robo-debt victims who received unlawful debts compared to the 370,000 identified by the government for refunds. Now, of course, I'll have links to the relevant articles below so you can read them yourself. Now, instead of spending this time talking about the legitimacy of any of these debts or the metric in which they used to determine this, at the old system and the supposed new fixed system, instead of discussing any of that, I'm going to use this opportunity to mention things from my own personal experience and from working on videos for this channel. Like, I will never forget that time a current affair accidentally showed the hand of the status quo by praising a young man who was all for the Centrelink income card that prevents people from buying cigarettes or alcohol or anything. This young man He was a young father who was all for this, saying it helped build structure and keep his finances in order. And you come to learn that he also had a job, and he was looking for another job to then hopefully get off of the New Start allowance. And while the main focus of the story was how well this card worked, there I am yelling, what do you mean he's got a job and he needs another one? Because I remember sitting there with family members and friends as they're putting in their hours they work so they can get their Centrelink. And I'm pointing out, if this is how it's set up, then what is actually rorting the system? I thought it was originally asking for handouts when you already had an income, but that's fine apparently now. The whole system is set up to help people who also have an income. You know what that is, ladies and gentlemen? That is the government subsidizing wages that employers are not paying. So I don't even want to start to begin to imagine the metric on which they determine is a debt owed to the government or not. They haven't even made that clear. And if you have people declaring the hours they work to then get that little bit extra money to maintain the roof over their head and food and not have to choose between one or the other. Let's not even talk about the little luxuries of life. And this was all before COVID. This was before we had a pandemic to deal with. Now, as Mr. Morrison says, if the best kind of welfare is a job, then why the hell are you allowing jobs to not pay enough so people still need welfare, you chud? Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe.